Vanished. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Client. It was a gray, overcast afternoon when Private Detective Sam Donovan received the unexpected phone call. The muffled voice on the other end of the line was hesitant, almost uncertain, as it requested a meeting in an out-of-the-way coffee shop downtown. The caller refused to give any details over the phone, only stating that it was a matter of utmost urgency. Intrigued, Sam agreed, noting the shaky tone in the caller's voice. Something was off. As he entered the dimly lit cafe, Sam scanned the room, quickly spotting a nervous-looking man seated in the far corner, fiddling with his coffee cup. The man was in his late 40s, with thinning hair and dark circles under his eyes, as though sleep had been eluding him for weeks. Sam approached and took a seat opposite him. "I'm Donovan," he introduced himself, watching as the man's hands trembled slightly. The man looked up, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and desperation. "My name is Jacob Hill," he said quietly. "I need your help. My sister, she's gone. No one remembers her." Sam frowned. "What do you mean, no one remembers her?" Jacob leaned forward, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Her name is Emma. She was staying with me for a while, but one day she just vanished. I tried to report it, but the police acted like I was crazy. They said there's no record of her. No identification, no photos, nothing. It's like she never existed." The detective's skepticism was hard to suppress, but there was something in Jacob's demeanor that suggested this wasn't just the rambling of a paranoid mind. Sam had dealt with plenty of unusual cases in his time, but this one was shaping up to be a real puzzle. "Okay," Sam said, pulling out his notepad. "Let's start from the beginning. Tell me everything you know about your sister, where she was last seen, who she might have been with, any enemies she could have had." Jacob hesitated, then began recounting his story. Emma had moved in with him a few months ago, after a bad breakup. She was reclusive, rarely leaving the apartment except for late-night walks. Jacob didn't know much about her life before she came to live with him. She was always secretive, even as a child. But despite her quirks, Jacob insisted she was real. "The last time I saw her was a week ago," Jacob said, his voice shaking. "She left the apartment one night and never came back. I tried calling her phone, but it was disconnected. I asked around the neighborhood, but no one remembered seeing her. Not even the landlord, and he met her when she moved in." Sam jotted down notes, his mind racing with questions. How could someone just disappear without a trace? More troubling, how could everyone forget her? He decided to start with the basics. Confirm Emma's existence, track down any records, and piece together her last known movements. "I'll look into this, Mr. Hill," Sam said, rising from his seat. "But I need you to prepare yourself. What I find might not be what you're expecting." Jacob nodded, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. As Sam left the cafe, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just stepped into something far more complex than a simple missing person case. There was something unnerving about the whole situation, something that gnawed at the back of his mind, refusing to be ignored. Sam walked briskly to his office, determined to dig into the case immediately. He had no idea what he was about to uncover, but one thing was clear: this was just the beginning. Chapter 2. The Unseen Clues. Back at his office, Sam began his investigation by doing what he always did: start with the facts. He opened his laptop, typing in Emma Hill's name into various databases. He searched for any trace of her: birth records, social media profiles, anything that would confirm her existence. But every search came up blank. It was as if Emma Hill had never existed. Sam's skepticism grew, but so did his curiosity. He tried another angle. If she had vanished recently, perhaps a financial record could lead him somewhere. He searched for transactions under her name, trying to track her spending. Again, nothing. Emma Hill's digital footprint was a void, a black hole where a life should have been. Frustrated, Sam picked up the phone and dialed a contact at the DMV. "Hey, it's Donovan. I need a favor. Can you check if there's a driver's license issued to an Emma Hill, possibly in the last 5 years?" The reply was quick. "Sorry, Donovan. No record of an Emma Hill in the system. Are you sure about the name?" Sam sighed. "Yeah, thanks anyway." He hung up, his mind running through possibilities. Maybe Jacob had gotten the name wrong. Maybe Emma was using an alias. But the more he thought about it, the less sense it made. Jacob seemed certain about his sister's identity, and if he was telling the truth, then something very strange was happening. He decided to visit Jacob's apartment, hoping to find some physical evidence that Emma had lived there. The building was old and a little run down, the kind of place where people mind their own business. When Sam arrived, Jacob greeted him at the door, looking more haggard than before. "Have you found anything?" Jacob asked, a glimmer of hope in his tired eyes. "Not yet," Sam admitted, "but I need to see her room. Maybe there's something here we can use." Jacob led him to a small bedroom at the back of the apartment. The room was sparsely furnished with a bed, a dresser, and a nightstand. It looked like someone had been living there recently, but there was a distinct lack of personal items. No photos, no keepsakes, nothing that could tell Sam more about Emma. Sam examined the room carefully. The dresser drawers were empty, save for a few articles of clothing. The nightstand held a single book, a worn copy of Wuthering Heights. Inside the cover, there was an inscription, "To Emma with love. Always J." It was the first concrete proof that Emma had existed. He held the book up to Jacob. "Who's J?" he asked. Jacob's face clouded with confusion. I don't know," he admitted. "I don't remember her mentioning anyone with that initial." Sam's frustration deepened. He had expected this case to be challenging, but he hadn't anticipated this level of mystery. There was no trail, no leads, only more questions. Who was J? Why had Emma disappeared? And why couldn't anyone remember her? Before leaving, Sam took one last look around the room. Something caught his eye, a faint outline on the wall, where it looked like a picture had been hanging. But the picture was gone, and when Sam asked Jacob about it, the man seemed puzzled, claiming there had never been anything on that wall. Sam left the apartment with more questions than answers. As he walked back to his car, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something, that the key to this mystery was right in front of him, just out of reach. 2 chapters in, and the puzzle of Emma Hill was only growing deeper. But Sam Donovan was determined to find out the truth, no matter where it led him. Chapter 3. The Forgotten Witnesses. Determined to uncover more about Emma Hill, Sam knew that his next step had to be talking to the neighbors. Someone had to have seen something, anything, that might provide a lead. He started with the closest apartments, knocking on doors, hoping to find someone who remembered Emma. But as each door opened, the responses he received were variations of the same unnerving refrain. Emma who? The more he questioned, the more bizarre the situation became. Some neighbors didn't recall ever seeing a woman in Jacob's apartment, while others vaguely remembered Jacob living alone. A few mentioned that they had seen a woman, but when pressed for details, they couldn't provide anything concrete. No descriptions, no memories of conversations, nothing. It was as if their recollections had been wiped clean, leaving only a vague sense that something, or someone, was missing. Sam's frustration was building. How could an entire building full of people forget about a woman who had lived among them? He was starting to wonder if there was something more sinister at play, something beyond the realm of normal explanation. Finally, Sam knocked on the last door in the hallway. It was answered by an elderly woman with sharp, observant eyes. Her name was Mrs. Caldwell, and she had lived in the building longer than anyone else. If anyone knew something, Sam figured it would be her. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Sam began, flashing a polite smile. "I'm looking into the whereabouts of a woman named Emma Hill. She lived with Jacob Hill in the apartment down the hall. Do you remember her?" Mrs. Caldwell's eyes narrowed as she studied Sam. "Why are you asking about her?" she asked cautiously. "I'm a private investigator," Sam replied. "Emma has gone missing and I'm trying to find out what happened to her." The old woman hesitated, then slowly nodded. "Yes, I remember Emma. She was a quiet girl, kept to herself mostly. But there was something strange about her." Sam's pulse quickened. "What do you mean by strange?" Mrs. Caldwell glanced around as if making sure no one else was listening. "I would see her sometimes late at night, standing by the window, just staring out into the darkness. She looked troubled. I once asked her if she was all right, but she just gave me a sad smile and said she was fine. I didn't press her. People have their own problems after all." Finally, a real lead. "Did you ever notice anything unusual? Any visitors? Or anything that seemed out of place?" Mrs. Caldwell frowned and thought. "Now that you mention it, there was a man. He came around a few times, always late at night. I saw them arguing once in the hallway. He looked angry, but she seemed more scared." Sam's interest was piqued. "Do you remember what he looked like?" The old woman shook her head. "It was always dark and I didn't get a good look at his face. But he was tall, well-dressed, like someone who had money. He gave me a bad feeling." Sam thanked Mrs. Caldwell and promised to keep her updated. As he left her apartment, he felt a mix of relief and unease. He finally had something to go on, a man who might know more about Emma's disappearance. But who was he and what was his connection to Emma? Back in his office, Sam began piecing together what little information he had. The mysterious man Mrs. Caldwell had seen might be the key to the whole case. But with no name and no clear description, finding him would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Sam decided to return to the apartment and wait. If this man had visited before, there was a chance he might come back. Sam settled into a spot where he could observe without being seen, hoping that his patience would pay off. Hours passed, and the building was quiet, save for the occasional creak of old pipes and the hum of distant traffic. Just as Sam was beginning to doubt his plan, he saw movement in the hallway. A tall figure approached Jacob's door, dressed in a dark coat. The man knocked, and when there was no answer, he turned to leave. Sam moved quickly, stepping into the hallway. "Excuse me," he called out, trying to sound casual. "Do you know Jacob Hill?" The man stopped and turned, his face partially obscured by the dim lighting. "Who's asking?" "I'm a friend of the family," Sam lied, keeping his tone light. "I've been looking for his sister, Emma. I was hoping you might have seen her." The man's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something Sam didn't like. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about," he said coldly. "You should be careful about asking too many questions." Before Sam could respond, the man turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the empty corridor. Sam watched him go, a cold knot forming in his stomach. This was no ordinary case, and whoever this man was, he wasn't someone to be taken lightly. But Sam had come too far to back down now. He was more determined than ever to find out what had happened to Emma Hill, no matter what it took. Chapter 4. The Hidden Threat. The next morning, Sam woke up with a lingering sense of unease. The man he had encountered in the hallway the night before was clearly involved in whatever had happened to Emma, but the cryptic warning he had given only deepened the mystery. Sam couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that every move he made was being scrutinized by unseen eyes. He decided to revisit Jacob, hoping to find out more about the mysterious man. When Sam arrived at the apartment, Jacob answered the door with dark circles under his eyes and an anxious expression. "Any news?" he asked, his voice tinged with desperation. "Maybe," Sam replied, stepping inside. "Jacob, do you know a tall man, well-dressed, who might have been visiting Emma late at night? Mrs. Caldwell mentioned seeing him a few times." Jacob's face paled. "You saw him?" "I did. He wouldn't tell me anything, but it's clear he knows more than he's letting on." "Who is he, Jacob?" Jacob swallowed hard, visibly shaken. I don't know his name. He just showed up one day a few weeks before Emma disappeared. She was scared of him, I could tell. She never said who he was, just that he was someone from her past." "Did he ever threaten her?" Sam pressed. Jacob nodded slowly. "I think so. She never told me exactly what he said, but after his visits, she'd lock herself in her room for hours, sometimes crying. I tried to get her to talk to me, but she always brushed it off. Said it was nothing, that I shouldn't worry." Sam's mind raced. Whoever this man was, he was clearly dangerous, and it was becoming increasingly likely that he had something to do with Emma's disappearance. But there was still the baffling question of why no one seemed to remember her. Even Mrs. Caldwell, who had been able to recall the man, hadn't mentioned Emma until Sam specifically brought her up. "What about you, Jacob?" Sam asked, leaning forward. "Are there things you can't remember about Emma? Do you ever feel like something's missing when you think about her?" Jacob's eyes widened with fear. "Yes," he whispered. "It's like there are gaps in my memory. I'll think about something we did together, but then it's like it's just gone. And the harder I try to remember, the more it slips away. Terrifying, Sam. I feel like I'm losing my mind." Sam's heart pounded. This case was becoming more surreal by the minute. Was it possible that someone, or something, was deliberately erasing memories of Emma? And if so, why? "Jacob," Sam said carefully, "I need you to think hard. Did Emma ever mention anything unusual happening before this man showed up? Anything strange, out of the ordinary?" Jacob shook his head, but then hesitated. "Wait, there was something. A few days before she started acting scared, I found her in the middle of the night, sitting in the dark, holding a piece of paper. She looked terrified. I asked her what it was, but she just shoved it in her pocket and told me it was nothing." "What did the paper look like?" Sam asked, feeling a surge of hope. It was small, like a business card. I never saw it again after that night. Sam felt a shiver run down his spine. A business card. It wasn't much, but it was the first real piece of evidence that Emma might have been involved in something dangerous, something that had led to her disappearance. He stood up, determination in his eyes. Jacob, I'm going to find out what happened to your sister. But I need you to be careful. Don't talk to anyone else about this, and if that man shows up again, you call me immediately. Jacob nodded, his expression grim. I will. And Sam, please find her. I don't know how much more of this I can take. As Sam left the apartment, his mind was buzzing with possibilities. The mysterious man, the missing business card, the strange memory lapses. Everything was pointing to a conspiracy that was far bigger than a simple missing person case. But what kind of power could make people forget an entire person? And why? As he walked back to his car, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and he quickly glanced around. But the street was empty, and there was no sign of anyone following him. Sam knew he was getting close to something big, something dangerous, but he was too deep into the mystery now to turn back. Whatever the cost, he would find out what had happened to Emma Hill. Chapter 5. The Elusive Truth. Sam spent the next few days diving deeper into the mystery surrounding Emma Hill. He visited every place she might have frequented, cafes, parks, even the library, hoping to find someone who remembered her. But the story was the same everywhere he went. No one had any recollection of Emma. It was as if she had been erased from the world, leaving behind only the faintest traces of her existence. Frustrated but not deterred, Sam focused on the one solid lead he had, the mysterious man. He pulled every string, contacted every source, and used every connection in his network to find out who this man was. After countless dead ends, one of his contacts, a tech-savvy friend named Greg, came through. Greg called late one night, his voice tense with excitement. Sam, I think I've found something. I traced some of the phone activity near Jacob's apartment around the time Emma disappeared. There was a burner phone in use, and the signal pinged off a tower near the old industrial district. Sam's interest peaked. That's not exactly a lot to go on, Greg. Wait, it gets better, Greg continued. I did some digging and found a connection to a place called the Meridian Foundation. It's a shadowy organization. No real online presence, but there are rumors. People say they're involved in some heavy stuff, experimental psychology, mind control, that kind of thing. Sam's blood ran cold. It sounded like the kind of far-fetched conspiracy theory he usually dismissed, but after everything he'd encountered in this case, he couldn't afford to ignore it. Where is this foundation located? That's the thing, Greg said, lowering his voice. It's in the old industrial district, near where the phone signal was traced. I'm sending you the address now. But Sam, be careful. If the rumors are true, these people don't mess around. Sam thanked Greg and hung up, his mind racing. The Meridian Foundation. Could they be behind Emma's disappearance? Were they responsible for the memory lapses everyone was experiencing? It was a long shot, but it was the only lead he had. The next morning, Sam drove to the address Greg had provided. The industrial district was a desolate, forgotten part of the city, filled with crumbling warehouses and factories that had been abandoned years ago. The building he was looking for was nondescript, just another decaying structure in a sea of them. But as Sam approached, he noticed something odd. The building was too quiet, too well maintained for a place that was supposed to be abandoned. He parked his car a few blocks away and approached on foot, staying in the shadows. The entrance was locked, but a side door yielded easily to a little pressure. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the scent of old machinery and dust. Sam moved silently through the darkened hallways, his senses on high alert. The deeper he went, the more certain he became that this was no ordinary abandoned building. The halls were lined with closed doors, each one labeled with a number. He pressed his ear to one, hearing faint murmurs from within, but it was too muffled to make out any words. Finally, Sam reached a door that stood slightly ajar. He pushed it open cautiously and stepped inside. The room was small, filled with filing cabinets and shelves stacked with boxes. In the center of the room was a table, and on it lay a collection of documents, medical records, psychological profiles, and detailed reports. As Sam skimmed through them, his eyes widened in shock. The documents detailed experiments on memory manipulation, tests on subjects who were made to forget specific events, people, and even their own identities. Some of the files were marked with red stamps, Successful. And then, in a folder near the bottom of the stack, Sam found something that made his heart stop. A file on Emma Hill. The report detailed her arrival at the foundation, the procedures performed on her, and the final outcome, erased from public consciousness. The implications were horrifying. The Meridian Foundation had somehow managed to erase Emma from the memories of everyone who had known her. But why? And how had Jacob retained even a partial memory of his sister? Before Sam could process the information, he heard footsteps approaching the room. Panicking, he quickly grabbed the folder and slipped it into his coat, then ducked behind a stack of boxes just as the door swung open. A man entered, tall and well-dressed, the same man Sam had encountered outside Jacob's apartment. He glanced around the room, his gaze sharp and searching, but he didn't notice Sam hiding in the shadows. After a moment, the man walked to the table, rifled through the documents, and then, seemingly satisfied, left the room. Sam waited until the footsteps had faded before slipping out of his hiding spot. He knew he couldn't stay here much longer. He had what he came for, and he needed to get out before he was caught. He retraced his steps back to the side door, slipping out into the cool morning air with his heart pounding. As he drove back to his office, Sam's mind raced. The Meridian Foundation was clearly involved in something dark and dangerous, but he still didn't know why Emma had been targeted. What had she done to warrant such an extreme response? And more importantly, how could he reverse what had been done to her? Sam's only hope was that the files he had taken would hold the answers. But as he pulled into his office parking lot, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He glanced around, but the streets were empty. This case was far from over, and Sam knew that the closer he got to the truth, the more dangerous it would become. But he was too deep now to turn back. Whatever it took, he would find a way to bring Emma Hill back from the shadows. Chapter 6. The Final Revelation. The folder on Emma Hill felt heavy in Sam's hands as he sat in his office, the dim light of his desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. He knew that whatever answers he found within those pages would change everything. With a deep breath, he opened the folder and began to read. The documents detailed Emma's involvement with the Meridian Foundation, but it was clear that she hadn't come to them willingly. According to the files, Emma had been a whistleblower. She had uncovered something, an illegal experiment conducted by the Foundation that targeted vulnerable individuals, manipulating their memories for nefarious purposes. The exact nature of the experiment wasn't clear, but the Foundation had deemed her a threat. Rather than eliminate her, they chose a more insidious route. Using their advanced technology, they erased her from the memories of everyone she had ever known, effectively making her invisible to the world. The only exception seemed to be Jacob, and even his memories of her were fragmentary at best. Sam's blood boiled as he read the cold, clinical language used to describe the procedure. The Meridian Foundation had turned Emma into a ghost, a living person without a past, a future, or even an identity. And now Sam was her only hope. He flipped through the remaining pages, looking for any mention of a way to reverse the process. Near the back of the folder, he found a brief note, an outline of the procedure's theoretical reversibility. The note suggested that, in some cases, if the subject was exposed to significant emotional triggers or familiar surroundings, their memories, and those of others, could begin to resurface. But the process was unstable and risky, potentially causing severe psychological damage. Sam knew this was his only shot. He had to bring Emma back, but it would mean confronting the Meridian Foundation head-on, a dangerous move that could cost him everything. Still, he had come too far to back down now. His plan was simple but risky. He would confront the man from the Foundation, the one who had been shadowing Jacob and who seemed to be the key to Emma's disappearance. Sam had a feeling that if he could push this man hard enough, he might just trigger the response he needed to restore Emma's identity. That night, Sam returned to Jacob's apartment. He wasn't surprised to find Jacob pacing the floor, anxiety etched on his face. "Sam, what did you find?" Jacob asked the moment he walked in. Sam held up the folder. "Everything we need. But it's not good, Jacob. They didn't just make her disappear, they made everyone forget she ever existed. They erased her from our minds." Jacob stared at Sam, shock and confusion mingling on his face. "How is that even possible?" "It doesn't matter how," Sam replied. "What matters is that we can bring her back. But I need your help." Jacob nodded, determination replacing the fear in his eyes. "Anything. Just tell me what to do." Sam explained the plan. They would lure the man from the foundation to the apartment and confront him with the truth. Sam believed that exposing the man to the evidence of his own crimes, and forcing him to face the emotional reality of what he had done, might be enough to destabilize the mental blocks that had been placed on Jacob and others. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. The following evening, Sam and Jacob waited in the apartment, the tension thick in the air. They had sent a message to the man through a contact, letting him know that they had new information about Emma's whereabouts. Sam hoped that the bait would be too tempting to resist. Just after midnight, there was a knock at the door. Sam motioned for Jacob to stay back as he opened it. The man stood there, his expression cold and unreadable. "Where is she?" the man demanded, his voice low and threatening. "Come in," Sam said evenly, stepping aside. "We need to talk." The man entered cautiously, his eyes scanning the room. When he saw Jacob, his expression darkened. "You shouldn't have contacted me, Hill. This was a mistake." "Was it?" Sam asked, closing the door behind him. "You've gone to great lengths to make us forget Emma, but it didn't work. We know what you did and we have proof." The man's eyes flickered, a brief flash of uncertainty crossing his face. "You don't know what you're dealing with. This goes far beyond anything you can imagine." "Maybe," Sam said, holding up the folder. "But I know this. What you did to Emma, to everyone who knew her, is unforgivable. You tried to erase her, but memories don't die that easily." Jacob stepped forward, his voice trembling with anger. "You took my sister from me. You made me forget her, made everyone forget her. But I remember enough and I want her back." The man's composure cracked for a split second, his gaze darting to the folder in Sam's hand. "You're playing with fire," he warned. "There are forces at work here that you can't control." "Maybe," Sam replied, "but I'm willing to take that risk." "Are you?" There was a tense silence as the man considered his options. Then, almost imperceptibly, his resolve wavered. "This isn't over," he muttered, his voice thick with resentment. But Sam saw the shift in his eyes, the recognition of defeat. The man knew he had been outmaneuvered, that the truth was a weapon he couldn't counter. Sam pressed his advantage, taking a step closer. "If you ever want to see this folder leave my possession, you'll undo what you've done. Bring Emma back. All of her." For a moment, the man looked like he might lash out, but then he took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "But don't think for a second that this ends here. There are consequences for actions like yours, Donovan." Sam didn't flinch. "Just do it." The man reached into his coat and pulled out a small device, no larger than a remote control. He pressed a series of buttons and the device emitted a faint, high-pitched sound. Sam felt a slight pressure in his temples like a headache coming on, but it passed quickly. "Give it a few minutes," the man said coldly. "She'll come back to you, but I promise you'll regret this." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving Sam and Jacob alone in the apartment. They stood in silence, waiting. Minutes passed and then, slowly like a fog lifting, Sam began to remember. Small details at first, then more vivid memories of Emma. Her laugh, the way she used to tilt her head when she was deep in thought, the long conversations they'd had during their late-night stakeouts. Jacob's reaction was more immediate. He let out a choked sob, tears streaming down his face as the full weight of his memories returned. "Emma?" he whispered. "I remember everything. I remember her." Sam placed a reassuring hand on Jacob's shoulder. "She's not gone, Jacob. Not anymore." In that moment, Sam knew the danger wasn't over. The Meridian Foundation was still out there, and they would come after him, after Jacob, after anyone who knew the truth. But for now they had won. They had brought Emma Hill back from the darkness. And Sam Donovan, private investigator, knew he wouldn't stop until the whole truth was exposed.